flee from a thing that surrounds me and leers through dead branches above.
Unfortunately, this story may be rather short, as I only got a glance at it. Additionally, this happened only about 20 minutes ago, so I'm still shaken up by it. Regardless, I'm a student at Auburn University. I was on the phone with someone, venting about why business majors need to learn calculus. Since me and her kept talking, I decided to not go straight back to my apartment, and instead drove down a country road while we kept conversing. The road is mostly surrounded by trees with some sparse houses and the occasional gas station or other business sprinkled along one side of the road. I knew I needed to get back to my apartment to keep studying, so after 4 or so miles, I turned around and was headed back. A few minutes later, still driving down the same road, and in a stretch with some buildings with their lights on to my driver's side, I glanced at my passenger side window and saw a pale, humanoid body leap out of a tree and land in the ditch to the right of my truck. It was rainy and dark, so I couldn't see entirely clearly, but there was enough illumination from a light on in a parking lot to make out human-like arms, legs, and just how white its skin was. It looked like it was curled up in a ball as well, which doesn't make sense why it would be doing that while jumping, but I know I could make out the clear silhouette of arms, legs, and I could tell that it was human-sized. I immediately pushed on the brakes to see if I could get a better look, and I swear I saw the red brake light glinting off the white skin as it moved along the ditch to the opposite direction from me and back towards the tree line. It was like I stopped thinking as what I just saw registered with me and the shock hit me. I looked in the mirror and my face was as pale as the thing's skin. The girl I was talking to had continued talking during all this, as she didn't have any idea that this happened, and I realized that I'd responded to the last few things she said with "sure" or other short responses like that. I thought about telling her what I saw, but I decided against it, as I didn't want to sound insane. I drove back to my apartment and told one of my roommates about it, who also is interested in things like this. He believed me, and we ended up joking about it a bit, which calmed me down. Sorry if this isn't the most descriptive or best written post. I think I'm still shocked at what I saw, but I wanted to see if y'all think there's any reasonable explanation or if it's what I think it is. What freaks me out even more is that I was on this subreddit earlier today. I've always been interested in stuff like this, and I stumbled across a comment where a guy said that his brother also had a possible sighting in Auburn as well. Please, let me know what y'all think. I work on a horse farm, and tonight while I was feeding my horse, I noticed they were all spooking at something on the other side of the farm, and my boyfriend kept saying there was a person on the other side of the farm. I thought he was seeing a tree that looked like a person until he pointed at where it was, and it looked like an unnecessarily tall person, and it started to move. I still thought it was a tree until we got to that side, and the donkeys that were put over there because of coyotes were acting scared, and they aren't normally scared. That's when I heard something in the woods, and we pointed the headlight over. My boyfriend grabbed his shotgun because we both thought it was a person, and then it sounded like it was running away, so I wasn't as concerned anymore. Until we saw one on the property next to the farm, and it wasn't a person. There's no way it was a person, but that's not what scared the both of us the most. It was when I was closing the gate and locking up that whatever was out there started running at me, and I ran to the car. When we got to the main road, it stopped chasing us. We looked back, and it was roughly 8 feet tall, and just standing in the middle of the road. I don't know what I saw, but I do know it wasn't a person. I don't know if what I saw was a crawler, but I would like to know if it was, and if they're going to cause issues out at the farm. Update. My boyfriend got to the main gate this time to see if it would chase him or if it was just going to chase me. And it chased him and chased his car down the road for a little bit. Probably should mention that he was cussing at it and probably made it mad. I've looked at some of the other stories and pictures on this sub, and I'm pretty sure that this is what we are dealing with. I had this encounter about a year ago, but I started thinking about it quite a bit recently. So I made an account just to post this, so please do tell me your thoughts about this. I had decided to go on a solo hiking trip for about 2 weeks. This would have been my second time doing something like this. The first 2 days of the hike were very average and relaxing, just a simple hike. But at night, things got a little bit weird. I went to sleep at around 9 or 10 p.m. and nothing much happened until around 2 a.m. I remember smelling a faint stench of rotting meat. It wasn't anything too crazy, but it was weird enough to somewhat wake me up. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but then I started to notice that something was moving around my tent. I did think that, because of the smell and the sounds, that it could be some carnivorous animal that maybe stank of rotting meat for whatever reason. But since I was half asleep, I wanted to make sure it's not a bear or something, so I opened my eyes to check around. Now, just to note that during the night, the moon was quite bright, so it was possible to see quite well outside. So when I opened my eyes, I could see a vague, lanky, humanoid shadow outside my tent. I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything. I did have a sidearm with me, so even if it was some creep, I didn't really feel threatened while holding a gun. After about a minute, the guy left, and the smell also disappeared. But since it was a very creepy encounter, I stayed awake for about an hour, and nothing else happened. And after nothing else happened, I went back to bed. The next day, I had that weird feeling of being watched by something dangerous. But I don't know if it was because I was confident in my ability to protect myself or whatever, but I didn't feel like I was in any danger at all. I just felt creeped out. I didn't really enjoy that day all that much, to be fully honest, and because of that, I set up camp a lot faster than I usually did, but didn't go to bed at my normal time, since I didn't want someone sneaking up on me again. At around 1 a.m., I could smell that weird smell again, so I gripped my gun a little bit tighter and tried to find the guy. But instead, all I saw were just a pair of yellowish eyes in the distance. I stared at them for about 5 minutes, and then they just vanished, together with the smell. I didn't feel like I was being watched anymore during that night, so after an hour, I did decide to go to sleep. The next day, the feeling of being watched was back, but again, I didn't feel as though I was in any danger at all. But I decided that even though I felt that way, I would still rather cut this trip short instead of actually getting into a situation where I am in danger, so I started making my way back. Though, through a more roundabout path. Nothing really happened that night. The next day I suddenly could smell that rotten stench. It wasn't any stronger than before, but since I was in a decently large clearing at that time and didn't see anyone or anything around me, I did panic a little bit and started walking with a faster pace. I'm not exactly sure on how long I walked after that, but around midday, the stench got stronger. Now, I think it's important to note that I don't have the best vision and should wear glasses, but I don't most of the time, so when I looked around me and saw a grey humanoid figure quite far away to my left, I did panic. But by the time I put my glasses on, it was gone. After that, I really didn't feel like staying there for much longer, so I started doing a slow run to get out of there faster. I'd run quite a distance while feeling something following me, but then I ran into this strangely peaceful clearing where both the stench and the feeling of being watched stopped. It was a relatively small clearing with a few small boulders around. But the strange thing was that a man who was in his late 40s or maybe even early 50s was sitting on one of the boulders. He was wearing very plain dad clothes, definitely not something you would be wearing while hiking in the middle of nowhere. Plus, he had no gear anywhere near him. But the thing that I noticed first about that guy was his strangely bright green eyes. They weren't bright in a literal sense, but more like the kind of brightness you would see in the eyes of a child. After running for so long, I was exhausted, and the man noticed that and told me to sit down on one of the boulders and rest. I didn't even think about it and sat down. We talked for a bit, mostly about hiking and nature, and while talking, he had this very friendly smile that made me feel at ease. When I had rested, he offered to help me build my campsite in the clearing. He was very good at starting a fire. We shared a cup of tea, and he told me that it was very nice talking to me, but he has to go now. He didn't really say why or where he has to go, but he just stood up and left. That night, I didn't hear any noises other than a few birds and crickets. When I woke up the next day, I felt very refreshed. I packed up and started to continue along the trail. I didn't feel like I was being watched or smelled that stench at all during the rest of my hike. Well then, this was the first time I've told this story in full detail. I usually say that some animal or whatever was following me, since that way people would actually believe me. But I decided to actually write exactly what happened. I also wanted to apologize for the long post and my English. I'm not a native English speaker, so please do correct me if I made any grammatical mistakes. And please, do share your thoughts on this. Okay, for starters, I did not believe any of this was real until after midnight last night. I believed everyone was just making things up and having communities like this to be a part of for shits and giggles. However, last night I saw something I could not and still cannot explain. I live in Newnan, Georgia. My house is very rural and surrounded by woods on all sides and all farms on my side of town. I do not know much about flesh pedestrians other than the mainstream stuff going around. Did not believe it was real. Met with my girlfriend about it all the time to scare her as jokes. Frequently mentioned their actual name. However, I got back to my house around 2 a.m. last night. I was on FaceTime with my girlfriend while I was driving home. However, upon arriving, and on about 80% battery I might add, my phone shut off and would not work. I didn't think anything of it. I get out of my truck and my dogs started going crazy, barking and growling loud. They only bark at people they don't know, as they are livestock guardians and don't pay animals they don't see as threats any mind. Anyways, while they are barking, I hear what sounds like fake barking close behind me. Almost like a person trying to sound like a dog bark. But if that person had never tried and was just shitty at it, it made my hair stand up because I had assumed it was a person in the woods behind me. I turned towards the sound and see nothing. The sound happens again, and when I look into the direction, I saw a creature I'll never forget. It was hunched on all fours, grey humanish face, large dark black eyes that reflected bright when the light was shined on it. No mouth, human-like body but with patches of fur throughout. Fur not covering body. Do not know any more details because as soon as I looked it in the eyes, it bolted towards me. I jumped in my truck and bolted. No more chasing. I called my grandmother, who lives through the woods, to give me an extra set of eyes so I know I'm not crazy. She, who has always been adamant that nothing exists paranormally, said she had been worked up by my dogs barking through the woods and a very high-pitched scream that sounded human and animal-like. We sat in the driveway and half-heartedly looked through the woods in the direction of the sighting. We began to hear a grunting in a different point in the woods. Loud grunting, kind of like a deer in rut. We turned to listen, and then it started behind us. Then, the scream she had heard before was changing directions around us, when we would turn to hear it every time. Could not sleep after going inside. Locked all the windows and doors. Heard it tapping and knocking on my bedroom for about an hour. After falling asleep, I had recurring nightmares of that being watching me and hunting me from different places. Please help me ID. Sounds like a Navajo skinwalker, but I live nowhere near their land, nor do I know any Navajo. I myself am part Cherokee and Creek, but only about 15%. No native ritual land I am on that I know of. I've never been skittish. My girlfriend routinely has to tell me not to go look in the woods by myself after hearing sounds. But after these sounds and what I saw, I will no longer be going outside at night. So this takes place in the Sacramento, California area. It was about 2 years ago now. It was winter, nighttime, around 2 a.m. I had just gotten off work but wasn't ready to go home, so I pulled over on the side of the road before turning into my neighborhood. On this street, there's a suburban neighborhood to the right and fields and trees to the left. As I was sitting there, I saw a figure come out of the neighborhood, a little less than a quarter of a mile ahead of where I was parked. Approximately where the neighborhood park is. It was hard to see from that distance, but it appeared tall, 7 to 8 feet, super skinny and bony, hunched over with long arms. It sprinted across the road at a speed faster than I've ever seen a human go. I couldn't guess the speed, but it was fast enough to concern me. If it wasn't for its speed, I probably would have just assumed it was a human and ignored it. But anyways, it disappeared into the fields. Something calm came over me. I don't know what it was, but something was keeping me from panicking. I remember just feeling like, okay, it is time to leave now, and calmly driving home. It wasn't until a few months later that I realized I had seen that and that it wasn't normal. Flash forward to a week ago. A friend and I were at the same park doing some spells. We're witches. As it got later into the night, we both started to feel more and more unwelcome there. As I was finishing up my spell, we heard an inhuman, guttural scream that sounded like it came from the area I saw that creature cross at. That's not particularly incriminating, but as soon as I heard the scream, its apparent location made me think of the creature. I didn't tell this to my friend as she is easily spooked, and I just tried to calmly finish up my spell. Didn't want to let my fear get out of control when doing spell work. We finally finished up and packed up and started the trek back to the car. As we left, we faced a dark area with lots of bushes and trees across from the sidewalk we were taking to get to the car. As soon as I faced that dark spot, I had the feeling of looking at a face. I didn't literally see a face, but it was the feeling of seeing a face. And it didn't feel like a human face. It felt like something that understood what I was, but didn't understand why I was there. It wasn't quite hostile, but had the attitude of, get out of my home. Once again, I didn't tell my friend that I saw that. Not until we got into the car. Ever since then, I have not been able to shake the feeling that that face belonged to the same creature I saw 2 years ago. What do you all think? Also, similar story but not the same. Last night, I was driving in a wooded area near Sac, and I saw a tall, burly figure in the woods with a white face. Not white as in Caucasian, white as in stark white. I thought it was wearing a green t-shirt, but I only saw it for a split second. It gave me such a bad, uneasy feeling that I started putting protection sigils on my windows. I told the guy I was with what I saw, and he didn't tell me until later, but he said he's heard rumors of people seeing white walkers in these woods that are described as tall and having white faces and black hair. I don't know if he meant skinwalkers or what, but that's what he said. I also felt like something was watching me in those woods later. Any input is appreciated. This is my kid's story, but I'm inclined to believe him. I just don't know what to make of it either. We live in a rural area, dead-end road. We walk it daily, so we're very familiar with the scenery and the neighbours' habits. He likes to look at the stars, so he went out for his last walk around 9 p.m. Came in out of breath. I thought maybe he heard coyotes and they spooked him. He said he was walking past a group of trees when he thought he saw movement. So he shined a flashlight that way and saw a grey face peeking at him from behind one of the trees. After Googling it, he showed me a picture of a rake and said it looked similar, but smaller eyes that reflected green. He thought at first it was a deer, but he couldn't see the rest of the body as he walked, and it didn't move, just kept watching. He said he walked as calmly as he could and watched it from the corner of his eye for as long as he could see it discreetly. And as soon as he got to our immediate neighbour's house, he ran. I wanted to call it a deer, but those trees have no tall brush around them, and 3 to 4 feet or so between each tree, you could easily tell if a deer was standing there. And the group of trees are roughly 10 yards from the road, so near enough to see clearly given the heavy-duty flashlight he takes. We went out tonight to see if we could see it, but nothing. Not that I wanted to, but he insisted. He needed to stumble upon it again with a witness for validation. I'm more live and let live. You stay out there and I'll stay in here. But it's really bothering him, and things have been strange around here lately. So, any ideas?
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.